Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Manbina Kaur and I am the Education Director for the Sikh Coalition. Today we wanted to tell you a little bit about how to deliver a presentation on who Sikhs are. These presentations could be for schools, for your place of business, or any other appropriate venue where a Sikh presentation has been asked for. The main components of the presentation are to start out with a short video. The Coalition recommends that you can start with the video Why I Wear the Turban, which is located on the Sikh Coalition's YouTube channel. This video is basically answering the question, why do Sikhs wear the turban? And the reason that we like to start out with this video is because that's the #1 question that Sikhs always get. And so we want to get that question out of the way from the very beginning so that the audience members that you're delivering the presentation to aren't always thinking about that question in the back of their head as you're going along the rest of the presentation. The second component of the presentation is a basic PowerPoint presentation. The Sikh Coalition has developed 2 different kinds of presentations. One is for younger children, elementary school audiences, and then the second one is for high school audiences or for adults. You might be wondering, what about the middle school kids? And so the Sikh Coalition recommends that if you are asked to do a presentation for 6th, 7th, or 8th graders, that you actually work with the teacher of those classes and ask them what presentation they think would be most appropriate for the kids that you're going to be presenting to. Usually for 6th graders, they can handle the elementary presentation, and then for 7th and 8th graders, the high school presentation might be more appropriate. And then after the PowerPoint presentation is over, we ask that you open up the floor for questions. You always want to be able to give your audience an opportunity to ask you questions, perhaps something that you want, that they want to elaborate on within the presentation itself that you didn't get to cover for too long of a time, or perhaps it's a question about a concept in Sikhi that you actually didn't mention and they just had some lingering questions about it. So you always want to end your presentation with a question and answer session. Total, the presentation usually lasts from 45 minutes to an hour. A couple of different reasons for that. One, the Sikh Coalition feels in our experience delivering these presentations that that's about as much information that someone can handle in a given period of time. They're learning most of the concepts you're teaching them about for the very first time, and so they really can't take in more information than what 45 minutes or an hour would provide. The second reason that we recommend that length is because usually when you're called into a school or a place of business to do a presentation, that's the amount of time that they usually have guest speakers come in for. Now, there are a lot of different components of the presentation that you can weave in that I haven't covered, depending on the nature of your audience. So for example, there are a lot of Sangat members that feel like doing a turban tying or doing a patka tying or a braid tying demonstration in front of the audience is really important because it helps them it helps you demystify what's underneath the turban, and it also helps you show the care and the respect in which you do tie your turban and your kesh every day. And so it's a fun element for the audience, and we definitely recommend, if you have volunteers in your area that are able to come with you to the presentation to help you demonstrate that you do that. There are also a lot of different cultural elements that you can incorporate in the presentation, and that's usually for the younger audiences, but you can definitely do it for the adults as well. I've heard of Sangat members writing every child's name who's in the class on a piece of paper in Punjabi so that they can take home that piece of paper and remember the presentation that way. I've heard of parents bringing in Punjabi food, for example, and giving it to the kids after the presentation as something fun for them. Or you can even dress, in a typical Punjabi outfit, wearing a salwar kameez or something like that during your presentation, and that's always fun for people to see as well. So those are the optional elements that we recommend. What I will be demonstrating for you today is how to deliver both an elementary presentation as well as a high school/adult presentation. One thing that the Coalition thought about when we were creating these educational materials is, what are the key objectives that we want non-Sikhs to walk away with after they've heard the presentation? And you'll see during the PowerPoint that there are certain concepts and facts that we spend a lot of time on in the presentation, and we do that purposefully because we want those points to be really stressed so that the audiences will definitely walk away with that message after your presentation is over. The very first objective is to know that Sikhism is an independent faith. It's not a branch or blend of any other religion. This is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about the Sikh faith, and so we definitely want people to know that during the presentation. The second thing is that we want people to realize that Sikhism is the 5th largest world religion. A lot of times when you go down the breakdown for them of the world religions and how many adherents each religion has, they're very surprised when they hear that there are 8 million more Sikhs in the world than there are people of the Jewish faith. And so that's something that we also want to stress during the presentation as well, that we're the 5th largest world religion. Another objective is to understand why Sikhs wear the turban. That's another reason why we actually start the presentation with that video. Why do you wear the turban? Because we know this is a really, really big question that non-Sikhs have. We definitely want to make sure within that 45-minute period that we're answering that question and that they're comfortable with the answer that we're giving them. The fourth objective is that after the presentation is over, people should have an appreciation for Sikhs, and you as the presenter is the one that is going to be giving them that appreciation through your presentation and your personal presentation style. We are hoping that by the end of the presentation, they appreciate and respect Sikhs so that there is a decrease in bias and bullying against Sikhs. And this goes back to the whole reason why we have education as such an important part of the Coalition's work. We really feel like that is one of the best ways that we can fight ignorance and discrimination in the country today, is by going out and giving these presentations, and is by teaching your neighbors about who Sikhs are. And then the fourth objective is to understand that Sikhs have had contributions to this country, both past and present, and we are Americans just like everybody else. And so you'll see that concept sort of peppered in throughout the presentation as well. Those are the 5 main objectives that we have for the presentations that we deliver. Now, I do want to say something about the presentation content. There are a lot of different aspects of Sikhi that we could have included in this presentation. And the reason that we picked the ones that we did is because we want to create a sort of base level knowledge for folks on who Sikhs are and what Sikhi stands for. And within 45 minutes, there's only so much material that you can tell them. And so, for example, with Gurdwara, we definitely mention what a Gurdwara is. We talk about the significance of langar, but we don't have time to go into details, for example, like Ardas or Kirtan or even Mata Tekna. Now, what I will say though is that if someone were to ask you during the question and answer session, can you tell me a little bit about what your services look like at your house of worship? That is a perfect opportunity for you to then expand upon, okay, this is what a service looks like, and you can talk about all those other things I just mentioned. I will say something about how the Sikh Coalition created this presentation. This presentation has been around in some form since the Coalition was first founded 11 years ago. But we have had an intense period of editing, and a lot of different Sikh experts as well as non-Sikh educators have looked at the material to make sure that we are sticking to 2 major things: accuracy and relevancy. Those are the 2 principal concepts that the Coalition really tries to hit home on all of our educational materials, and these PowerPoints are no exception. And so we want to be very true to what Sikhi actually is, and let people know these are the facts and this is what Sikhi represents, but we also want it to be relevant for the audience that we're talking about. We want it to be easily digestible for whoever we're giving this presentation to. Since there are 2 different audiences that we have created for these presentations, the elementary school audience and the high school or adult audience, you also have to have a different way of interacting with both of these audiences because your energy level and everything else is going to be a bit different. So there are certain things you should keep in mind no matter which type of audience you're giving a presentation to. You do need to be enthusiastic and friendly and open. You should always try to use personal stories and weave in your own experiences in the presentation. That's how your audience members can connect to you. But you also need to provide opportunities for your audience to also participate in the presentation. And that could be through a show of hands. You could ask them questions and have them answer them for you. You could take a poll during your presentation. But there are different things that you should always do to keep the energy level up and to make sure that they're engaged throughout the presentation. There are certain things that you should do specifically for elementary school audiences. So for example, because those kids are coming to you really to be entertained, you need to keep that objective in mind when you're speaking with them. You're going to want to use phrases that appeal to little kids. Like, put your thinking caps on, or try to tuck that away in your brain for later because I'm going to ask you, what we talked about in a little bit. Or try to remember, the 5 things that you learned new about Sikhs today because I'm going to give you a pop quiz at the end, but don't worry, it's not for a grade, or something like that. You need to sprinkle in those little kid-friendly phrases to make sure that they stay engaged with you. And you can also give them encouragement throughout the presentation. Let them know that they're doing a good job, that they're answering the questions correctly, and try to keep it, again, very upbeat for them. Now for the adult presentation, the objective is a little bit different. They're actually coming to you to learn something. And so you should keep that objective in mind when you're giving the presentation. And since this is a more of a mature audience, I think you can expand a little bit more on the bullying or the terrorism aspects of the presentation when we talk about the fact that Sikhs are equated with terrorists just because of the turban and beard. You can expand on that concept more with an adult audience than you would with a children's audience. And then you need to be a little bit more professional than playful with an adult audience, which goes without saying. So I'm going to demonstrate for you guys right now how to deliver an elementary school presentation, and then how do you deliver an adult presentation. And you'll notice that my energy level and my examples that I use are going to be a little bit different for both audiences. We always encourage you to start out your presentations with an attention-grabbing hook. And this hook could be in the form of a question that you're asking your audience. It could be a story that you're relating. It could be humor, using humor, telling them a joke at the very beginning. It needs to be something that's going to grab their attention, but also leads them back into the presentation and the material that you're going to be presenting. One hook that I like to use, and can be used for both elementary school audiences and for adults, is asking them, can someone raise their hand and tell me what is in common with these 3 people? A policeman, a Superman, and a firefighter. And give them time to think. And usually the responses that you're going to get from both types of audiences are going to be something along the lines of, all 3 of those people have a uniform, so they're easily identified. And all 3 of those people are supposed to help you in case you need it. And so once they get those 2 answers, praise them for doing a good job and getting the answers right. And then I would say something like, that's exactly right. And we're going to talk about a different group of people today who also wears an external uniform because they want to be identified. And they're also supposed to help you in case you need it. And that group of people is called Sikhs. And let me tell you a little bit about who Sikhs are. And then you would lead into the presentation. Okay, so who are the Sikhs? We just finished watching a video where a lot of different Sikhs were answering the question, why do you wear the turban? And now we're going to go into a little bit of a synopsis of who are the Sikhs and a little bit of their history in this country as well. I am going to answer questions at the very end, so if you guys could do me a favor and hold on to your questions at that time, that would be wonderful. So we're going to start out from the very beginning with some common misconceptions that people have about who Sikhs are. The very first one, if I can get a volunteer to read that for me, please. You would call on somebody and they would read the sentence after fiction, which is Sikhs are Muslim because they wear a turban and have a beard. So thank you so much. Sikhs are Muslim because they wear a turban and have a beard. So this is a very common misconception that people have about who Sikhs are. Turbans are worn in a lot of different countries, but it's for cultural reasons, not necessarily religion. Sikhism is the only religion that asks its followers to wear a turban, and the turban is considered a Sikh article of faith. Okay, let's move on to the second misconception. Can I get a volunteer to read the sentence after fiction, please? And then you would have them read, Sikhism is a blend of Hinduism and Islam. Awesome, thank you so much. This is the second biggest misconception that people have about who Sikhs are. Sikhism is a completely independent religion. It is not a branch or a blend of any other faith. Sikhs have our own spiritual guides, or who we call gurus. Sikhs have our own houses of worship. Sikhs have our own scripture. So we are not combined with any other faith. Now there are definitely things that Sikhs have in common with other faiths. So for example, both Sikhs and Christians are both monotheistic religions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that either is a branch or a blend of the other. So this is a short history lesson for you guys about Sikhs and their immigration history in this country. When Sikhs first came to America, they came from an area in South Asia called Punjab. And they basically settled along the west coast in California and Oregon and Washington, and then later on in the east coast in New York and New Jersey, which is actually why you see the biggest pockets of the Sikh population today are in those two areas of the country. When they first came to the west coast, they engaged in professions like working in sawmills, working as laborers, working on the railroad. Sikh immigrants were actually responsible for creating the Transcontinental Railroad, which, as we know, bridges the East and the West together. And they were also had notable accomplishments in the lumber industry as well. Something else that Sikhs engaged in when they first came here is in farming. And so this is kind of an odd profession for them to engage in when they got to this country. And the reason for that is because Sikhs were very successful farmers back in Punjab when they first came here. And they found that in California, the land and soil conditions were very similar to what they had in Punjab. So they were kind of like, okay, if we did a good job in Punjab, let's try our hand at it here. And Sikhs became so successful as farmers in California, in fact, that the government passed the Alien Land Act in 1913, which basically banned any non-citizen from owning land. And so Sikhs said, okay, let's try to fight for citizenship. Let's try to get citizenship in this country. And there's one Sikh in particular, his name is Bhagat Singh Thind. He fought for citizenship in the 1900s, and it was given to him and then later taken away. And then he fought for citizenship again. It was given to him and then it was later rescinded. And then the third time he fought for citizenship, it actually stuck, and he was granted citizenship, but not because of merit, because he actually deserved it, but just because he was a World War I veteran. And so we see Sikhs, just like every other immigrant group in this country, has had to fight for their citizenship, fight for their rights, and really struggle to gain a foothold in this country. And the Sikh story is no exception to that. Sikhs are also have been successful in federal government. So the very first Asian American elected to Congress happened to be a Sikh, and his name was Dalip Singh Sond. So here's a little pop quiz for you guys. Sikhism is the 5th largest world religion. Can you guys help me figure out the first largest? Any guesses? And then you would go on and just, as you're sort of polling the audience and getting them to guess out loud, you would reveal the right answers. And then when you hit 5, you would get them to say Sikhism. And then Judaism is the 6th largest world religion. Now this is really interesting because I think if you stop the average American on the street and you ask them, what do you know about the Jewish faith versus what do you know about the Sikh faith, I would venture to say that they know a lot more about the Jewish faith. And that's wonderful because we should always learn about each other's cultures and backgrounds and religions. I just think it's interesting that there are 8 million more Sikhs in the world than there are Jews, and we know so little still about who Sikhs are. But that's exactly why I'm here to tell you guys today a little bit about my background and who I am. These are the core Sikh beliefs. The very fundamental principle of the Sikh faith is that there's one God for everybody. Okay? There's one God no matter what religion you belong to. There's one God for everybody. And the second thing is that everyone is considered equal in the eyes of that God. And so this goes across gender lines, religion, culture, language, ethnicity, any division you can think of. There is equality amongst everyone. And then there's three things that Sikhs should do on a daily basis. The very first one is to live and work in a very honest way. I'm sure you guys have heard this growing up in school from your teachers and your parents, always tell the truth, always conduct yourself in a very honest way. If you're a student, be an honest student. If you're a lawyer, be an honest lawyer. If you're a doctor, be an honest doctor. Anything you engage in life, just do it with a lot of honesty to your profession. And Sikhs are no different from that. The second thing is to share with other people. Again, this is a basic sort of human value. Share what you have with other people. Provide other things and benefits to people who are around you for the well-being of all. And so for Sikhs, that doesn't just mean sharing your belongings. It could also mean sharing your time, being compassionate. It could mean, volunteering. It could mean sharing your money, donating to worthy causes. So there's a very big part of the Sikh tradition which focuses on service to your fellow community members. And then the third one is to remember God all the time, to remember God throughout the day. And the thought here being is that if you are a good person, if you are honest, if you work hard, if you consider that everyone's equal, and you share yourself with your fellow community members, that you are remembering God through all of those different actions. There are a few things that Sikhs do not do. So Sikhs don't believe in fasting or superstitions or ritualism or the caste system. At this point in the presentation, I would actually stop and poll the audience and see if they could give me a short synopsis of what the caste system is. Usually adults have a pretty good idea of what it is, and it takes a few helpful volunteers to sort of put the pieces together. But basically you want to relate to folks that the caste system holds on to this idea that just because of the family that you are born into or the last name that you carry, that would dictate what your profession would be, the kinds of people you would interact with, and how spiritual you could be, because the lower castes were not given access to the spiritual texts and guides. And so Sikhism, when Sikhism came about, we believe that everyone's equal. And so why would we hold on to this idea that something was limited just because of the family or the last name that you have? And so that's why Sikhism does not believe in the caste system. Now you'll notice I never attributed the caste system to a particular religion, and that is on purpose, because we don't want people to feel like Sikhs are against Hindus or Sikhs are denouncing Hinduism. We just want to say that the caste system was very prevalent in India at the time that Sikhism emerged, and that's all you really have to say about it. Sikhism also prohibits smoking, drinking alcohol, or taking any other kinds of intoxicants. Now, Vaisakhi is probably one of the biggest days on the Sikh calendar. It happens in April of every year. And a lot of the major cities in the country actually have parades to commemorate Vaisakhi because it's a very big celebration and a very auspicious day for Sikhs. On this day in 1699, the Khalsa was created. Now the Khalsa is a name given to the community of initiated Sikhs. Okay, so at some point in your life, in the Sikh tradition, you are encouraged to take part in this initiation ceremony or in a commitment ceremony. Now, it can be done at any time in your life. There's no particular age subscribed to when you have to take part in the Khalsa. But it is a private commitment and a public declaration to everybody else that you are now formally adopting the Sikh lifestyle. So what does this mean? It means that you keep an external appearance, which I'll talk about in just a second. And it also means that if you are a man, you would shed your last name and have Singh as your last name. And if you're a woman, you would shed your last name and have Kaur as your last name. Now, why do you think Sikhism would say this? Why do you think we would say that you would take away your last name or your caste name and you would replace it with Singh if you're a man and Kaur if you're a woman? And at this point, you're trying to get them to answer the question through equality. Sikhs believe that everyone's equal, and so if we don't believe in the caste system, then that's another way that we're sort of denouncing the caste system and what it comes with, and we're also recognizing that you're only going to identify yourself with being a Sikh. And so that is why you would keep Singh and Kaur, and you're no longer being identified with your last name or your caste name. People have also answered this question like everyone is one. You're all sort of joining a new family together. I've also heard that response. But you do want to steer them towards the whole equality aspect when they're answering this question. So what does this distinct external appearance mean? It means carrying the 5 Ks. The only reason we call them the 5 Ks is because they each start with the letter K in our language. And they are all 5 articles of faith that anyone that has taken part in this initiation ceremony will carry on their person. The very first one is a kada. So it is an iron bracelet, and it's supposed to remind you to always do good things. Usually whenever you do something, you're doing it with your hands. And so if I'm doing something wrong or something that I know is not in line with Sikh principles, when I see my kada, it's sort of like a reminder to me that no, I shouldn't be doing that. And so that's one of the reasons that we wear the kada. The second one is a turban, which is a sword. It's supposed to represent protection, not just for yourself, but for anyone else that needs it. And in the very beginning, I talked about how a policeman, a superman, and firefighter all have in common that they're supposed to help you in case you need it, and that they all wear a uniform. Well, this is a Sikh's uniform. This is our external uniform. And so the turban is just one piece of that uniform that reminds us to always stand up against injustice. There is also a kachera, which represents self-discipline, which are long underpants. The ganga, which is a wooden comb. It's supposed to remind you to always be well-groomed. There's a very big concept in Sikhism of always maintaining a professional appearance, always presenting yourself to the outside world in a very dignified way and keeping clean. And then there is the gesh, which is uncut hair. So even though I haven't taken part in the initiation ceremony, I still keep my hair uncut and I still wear a kada. And so you will see this throughout the Sikh population, that there are certain members who haven't taken part in the initiation ceremony. They haven't become a part of the Khalsa, but they still might wear 2 or 1 or 3 out of these 5 Ks, and that's pretty common. Now, all 5 of these things really compromise the external uniform of a Sikh. When someone walks into a room wearing these 5 Ks, you automatically know that person is a Sikh. That person represents quality for everybody. That person is going to stand up against injustice. That person is supposed to always tell the truth, etc., etc. Everything that we've learned so far today. This is a sort of neon sign to everybody around you that this is who I am and this is what I stand for. Now, out of these 5 Ks, keeping the hair long, the gesh, and covering it with a turban is probably the aspect that is the most identifiable when you see a Sikh person for the very first time. So let's expand a little bit more on what the turban is. Now, again, when you saw in the video in the very beginning, you noticed that people were responding with why I wear the turban with answers like, helps me stand out in a crowd, shows my commitment to my faith, I wear it because I'm a Sikh. I feel proud of it, things like that. And so those are all the types of responses you might see if you pulled any Sikh on the street and asked them those questions. But it really boils down to this basic idea of identity, being identified as a Sikh. 99% of the time that you see someone with a turban in the US, they're going to be a Sikh. Let me say that again. 99% of the time that you see someone with a turban in the US, they're going to be a Sikh. That means at the grocery store, at the post office, driving next to you on the highway, at your place of business. 99% of the time that you see someone with a turban, they're going to be a Sikh. Now, raise your hands if you have seen someone with a turban on TV. Okay, keep your hands raised if that person was a terrorist, or that person was Osama bin Laden, or part of Al-Qaeda. Okay, so I hope at this point in the presentation I've articulated to you that Sikhs have nothing to do with terrorists, but yet so many people are getting these images of turbans and beards on TV, and they're equating it with what they're getting in real life. Because in real life, 99% of the time you see someone with a turban, they're going to be a Sikh. Most of the time you see someone with a turban on TV, they're probably not going to be a Sikh. And so that is why there is a huge disconnect between what people are getting in real life and the images in the media. So no wonder people have confused the two groups together. But that's exactly why I'm here today, because I want to tell you a little bit more about who Sikhs are, so that people are no longer confused and people have a greater understanding for who Sikhs are, what the turban represents, and what the likelihood is that when you see someone in real life in this country, that they're going to be a Sikh. Now, Sikhs wear it as a religious obligation. I mentioned that in the beginning. Sikhism is the only religion that asks its followers to wear a turban. I mentioned also you're doing it because you want to be recognized as a Sikh and you want to be able to offer help to anyone that needs it. And under no circumstances can the turban be forcibly removed. And the reason that we include this part in the presentation is because there are instances where, for example, in schools, people's turbans are ripped off or touched inappropriately, or there have been bias incidents where people's turbans have been thrown off their head. Those are very egregious acts against Sikhs. It's not just harmless teasing or making fun of someone. It's bullying. It's very, very shameful for a Sikh to be caught in public without their head covered or without their turban on. This is a part of their uniform. This is a part of their dress. It's a very intrinsic part of their identity, and it's a religious article of faith. And so it should always be touched and treated with the most respect and care. So these are some examples of what a Sikh turban might look like and what a non-Sikh turban looks like. Now again, Sikhs are wearing their turban for religious reasons, and all these other groups are going to be wearing their turbans for cultural reasons or for fashion statements. So in the Sikh tradition, usually men wear turbans that can be more round or the pointed style like the police officer is wearing. Usually when women wear turbans in the faith, they wear the more round style. And then little boys, before they start wearing the full-on turban, they'll wear a smaller turban called a patka. And this little boy right here is super cute because he's matching his patka to his shirt, to his book pack, and I think that's really cool because he's very fashionable. Now, on the right here, you'll see some non-Sikh turbans. And some people might have the question, oh, the Iranian turban is very similar to the Sikh turban, and if I saw someone wearing that style, how do I know if they're a Sikh or they're not a Sikh? And so I would always say, just approach them, come up to them, ask them, are you a Sikh? Do you wear kurta? I think I learned about you the other day in a presentation and struck up a conversation with them. Every Sikh I know, and I know a lot of Sikhs, have always been open and willing to answer questions about why they wear the turban, who they are, to anyone else. Because, look, Sikhs aren't stupid. We know we stand out. We know we look different. That's why we wear the turban and keep our hair long, because we want to stand out. And so please feel free to approach members of your community if you think they're a Sikh and introduce yourself. So people always ask us, what is the significance of the turban color and the size and the style and all that? And there's really no significance. It's really up to your own personal preference. My old boss always wore a green turban for St. Patrick's Day. My brother usually sticks to blues and blacks. He's kind of boring in that department, so I'm trying to spice up his wardrobe a little bit by introducing more stripes and other designs, but it's really up to you. The next time you see a Sikh and you see that they're matching their turban with their tie, point out, tell them they're sporting a good turban that day, but it's really just personal preference. So where do Sikhs get our spiritual guidance from? We get them from our gurus. So let's break down this word actually into its components. There's gu, which means darkness, and ru, which means light. So a guru is literally someone that brings you from the dark into the light, or brings you from ignorance into enlightenment. And so there have been 10 gurus in the Sikh tradition, and they've all preached a message of love for God, social justice for humanity, don't believe in freedom, don't believe in superstitions or rituals. And their guidance and their teachings were all preserved in our scripture. So the present day guru today is a combination of our scripture, which is called the Guru Granth Sahib, and also this worldwide community of initiated Sikhs, which is called the Guru Panth, so the Khalsa, which we talked about earlier. So both of these entities serve as the present day Guru for all Sikhs. The scripture is 1,430 pages, and it's all written in poetry. So when you read from the scripture, you're not actually reading from it, you're more like singing from it. And it's considered the living guru for all Sikhs, and just teaches you how to be kind, be a good person, how to love and respect everybody. And all of the Sikh services consist of singing and learning from the Sikh scripture. It's the main focal point of all of our services. Now this is a place where Sikhs go to learn and to pray. It's called a gurdwara. Can you guys say that word? Great, gurdwara. So what are some other places that people go to learn and to pray? What are some other houses of worship? And then at this point, they'll answer with church or synagogue or mosque or mandir, and you would praise them and say that they did a good job, and then you would bring it back to Sikhi and let them know that this is where Sikhs go to learn and to pray. So everyone is welcome in a gurdwara. It doesn't matter what religion you belong to, what part of the country you're from, old or young, male, female, anyone is welcome to the gurdwara. Services usually follow the working calendar, and so they're usually on the weekends, on Sundays. And at the end of the service, everyone sits down together and shares a meal together. And this meal is called langar. Now, growing up, I always used to think that the reason that Sikhs did this is because Sikhs just love food. And later on, when I got older, I started to understand the actual significance of langar. You have to remember that at the time that Sikhism emerged, there was a very stratified, the society was very stratified, and so having someone from a lower caste sit down and literally rub elbows and break bread with someone from a higher caste was unheard of. They would never be sitting down together and sharing a meal together like that. And so langar is yet another way that Sikhism tried to let everyone know that no, we are all equal. We all deserve the same respect and love, and we're all going to partake in this meal together because we are all the same. And so that is the main reason why langar was instituted. Most Sikhs speak Punjabi. So if you'll remember from the very beginning of the presentation, I showed you guys a map where most Sikhs came from this area in South Asia called Punjab, and they immigrated to the US. So for that reason, most Sikhs speak Punjabi today because most of them originated from Punjab. But if you are a Sikh and you happen to be born in China, then you would speak Chinese. If you are a Sikh and happen to be born in Germany, you would speak German. And so that's why we say most Sikhs speak Punjabi. In fact, over 80 million people in the world speak Punjabi. And it's written from left, right, just like English is. But unlike English, it has 35 letters. And as we know, English only has 26. So that is the script. So you can see what the letters look like on the right-hand side. And here, I've just written a word here in Punjabi to demonstrate the difference between Punjabi and English. This is a common greeting that you would say to someone if you saw them for the very first time that day. And then they should respond with hello, and then you'll notice that it doesn't look like H-E-L-L-O. Sikhs can be found in a lot of different professions. We can have Sikh artists. These are world-renowned artists from the UK, the Singh twins. We can have Sikh actors. This is Varis Ahluwalia, who has starred in multiple Hollywood blockbusters. We can have Sikhs in sports. This is a Sikh who played for the Trinity University basketball team in San Antonio. Sikhs in the military. We can have Sikh scientists. Sikhs in the military, this is Colonel Sekho. And the scientist is Dr. Gubani, who is the father of fiber optics. Whenever I do these presentations, I always act like I know what fiber optics is, but I really don't. I think it's some kind of way for radio and all of that to communicate with each other, but he's a very learned person and has had hundreds of patents. He's a very, very acclaimed scientist. We can have Sikhs as politicians. So we have a Sikh there in a blue turban, the current Prime Minister of India, Manmohan Singh, shaking hands with our president, of course, President Obama. We can have Sikh doctors, Sikh lawyers, Sikh filmmakers, and then as we saw in the very beginning, we can have Sikh farmers as well. So at this point, I would end the presentation and I would tell folks that just because we might look different or come from a different background or speak a different language, that shouldn't be a reason that we sort of discriminate against each other or use that as reasons not to associate with each other. And we should really embrace diversity, and we're very lucky to be in this country where we're surrounded by so many different types of people with different backgrounds. And so I think we should take advantage of that and really use this as a learning opportunity and emulate this. And that's the conclusion of the presentation. So at this point, I'm going to open up the floor for questions. If anyone had anything that they wanted to ask about, I would be happy to answer them. So one thing I wanted to mention at the conclusion of this, as you guys saw me demo these two types of presentations, is that it's very important as you're speaking to be very personable. I try to weave in personal stories or anecdotes, and I try to get audience participation as much as possible. And that's the way that you can keep your audience engaged for sure. But you also need to find some way to connect with your audience, because 5 to 10 years from now, they might forget everything that you taught them about Sikhi, but they won't forget how they felt about you as a presenter. And so it's really important for you to impress upon them that positive association with Sikhs. That when they walk out of that room, when they see a Sikh, they should think good things. And when they hear about Sikhs, they should think good things. And you really are the ambassador of Sikhi for that day for them. And so own that, and use that to empower yourself and use that to spread the beauty of Sikhi as we know it to your neighbors. So thank you so much. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.